Hi, in this video we're going to be creating a VM from scratch and install GNS3 on it, along with a demo version of Hewlett-Packard virtual switch that we're going to use to create different types of networks. So let's start by creating a droplet. I'm going to create a droplet, and then for this exercise, or for this semester, we actually need to use an older version of Ubuntu. We're going to use 16.04. The instructions that you're going to see next do not run on 18.4. 18.4 requires a few changes, so we're going to simplify it by installing an older version that is still supported. I'm going to pick a optimized droplet. Notice that I pick a 4 gigabyte optimized droplet. Ideally, you should go with an 8 gig if you're going to create large networks. Let's create a 4 gig for now. And I'm going to pick San Francisco region number 2. I'm going to select private networking and IPv6. And I'm going to call my machine ITS 6250 GNS3 SRV01. I'm going to create my machine. And let's wait until it's created, and when it's created, we'll log into it the usual way. So here my machine is created. Let me connect to it. I'm gonna do this demo on a Mac, so I'm gonna grab a terminal window and connect to my machine. I like to use a program called iTerm2. It's a free terminal window. So I'm gonna grab this and I'm gonna connect to the IP address that they gave me. So I'm gonna copy this IP address and connect to that using my terminal window. I'm gonna do SSH root at that machine. And via email, I already received the password, so I'm gonna just do the usual one and copy the password and paste it there. I'm gonna change the password to a different one. Okay, and so once I'm done doing that, I'm gonna go with the instructions that you saw previously to create a virtual machine. So I'm gonna add my username, we don't need this, okay, and then we're going to add this new username to the admin list for the system. Okay, Control X, yes, enter. And then I'm going to exit and connect with this new username to my machine. Then I'm gonna remove the ability to use the root user to log into the machine by removing the password. And then my IP table, so I'm going to copy all the rules and paste them right here. So all my rules. Now we can display that they're correctly created. And let's update the system. Let's upgrade it. We're gonna keep that current version of that utility, and then let's see. Okay, so once we're done that, let me increase the contrast here. We're gonna install IP tables per system to keep the tables, the rules in memory. Oh, sorry, and stored whenever we reboot the machine. Okay, so to this point, let's do a reboot and let's reconnect to our machine. It's gonna take just a minute or so to reboot. Let's wait until it's ready. Be ready by now. There it is. Okay, notice that it says that the new release is available. We won't install the new release for this semester. If you're interested in installing it, I can give you a list of different commands that you'll need to run to install GNS3. But for now, we're gonna stick with the previous version. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna follow our instructions, and we're going to install a graphical environment and some software to connect to that graphical environment. So this is going to take a little bit of time. So I'll pause the video and come back when the install is done. It's done. Next thing that we need to do is we want to check if indeed our virtual machine that we're creating, our droplet, has the ability to virtualize the switches that we're going to be installing, the network switches. So in order to do that, we're going to check that if indeed there's more than one virtual processor that the machine can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste this command right here in order to check if that is indeed true. So if the output of this next command right there is greater than 0, you're good. So in this case, we have access to 2 virtual processors inside our virtual machine, which is what we needed. And virtual processors that can run our new virtual machines or new switches inside our virtual machine. Then we're going to install a checker to see if the virtualization environment is allowed to be run here in our virtual machine. So after we install that, let's run kvm OK and say that indeed we can run the virtualization environment inside our virtual machine. Remember, we're doing recursive virtualization. Now let's install the tools to run the virtualization environment. That's the first line right there. Here we have to watch for there any messages that there's any errors during the installation. It's usually straightforward. If you look at the log here, there's no errors, just unpacking and installing. So we're good there. Next, we need to install the actual utilities that allow us to run the graphical environment to run these virtual machines or the virtualization environment. Okay, so all set. There's no errors there. So let's go ahead and we need to add the user to a group so that we can start the virtualization environment. So let's add that one. So we're good. And then we can test if our installation went okay. We can actually run this command and you see a list of a table with no virtual machines running. We're okay. This means that we're have the virtualization environment running, but there's no virtual machines that are running. So we're good up to that point. Then we're going to actually install GNS3. In order to do that, we need to add the repository to download the latest version of GNS3. We say enter. Okay, and then we need to run our update so that the contents of that repository are updated on our local machine. And then we install GNS3. That's gonna take a little bit, so I'll pause the video and I'll come back when it's done. If I am gonna allow non-super users to be able to run GNS3, we're gonna say yes, and non-super users be able to capture packets, we're gonna say no, and I'm gonna pause the video again until the installation is done. GNS3 is installed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit and I'm going to open a new tunnel, a new connection using SSH to our droplet. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a tunnel to send the graphical information over SSH. So let me copy the IP address of my VM again. I'm going to go here. I'm going to say SSH with my user JROS at the IP address. And then I'm going to create a tunnel and say any traffic that my local machine, my laptop here, receives to as being directed to port 5900, send them to the local host, and this local host here refers to the actual droplet over there, the droplet. So the droplet is going to send it to itself, also to port 5900. So what I'm doing is I'm taking any traffic that goes to port 5900 on my machine, sending it through the tunnel, sending that through the tunnel to the droplet, and the droplet is in charge of giving it to itself, that's localhost, and also port 5900. And port 5900 is the default port that we use for VNC viewers or VNC servers, which is the graphical environment, which will allow us to look at the graphical environment that we install. So let's open the tunnel. And notice that indeed nothing happened. It tells me that I need to do a reboot. So I'm gonna actually do a reboot now. And I'll come back again after it reboots. So I'm again here trying to connect to our machine with the tunnel. So I'm gonna log in. Notice I had to add this line here of -L 5900 localhost 5900 in order to connect to the machine. And open the tunnel. And now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start the graphical environment on my virtual machine. I'm gonna use the VNC server called X11 VNC. I'm gonna create and say I want to create a session. And I also like to include that geometry for my session, so I use a geometry of 1024 times 768. And it takes just a few seconds, and then it tells me that the VNC desktop is ready on port 5900. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a real VNC viewer. So I have already a viewer installed. So this is my VNC viewer. And I'm going to connect my viewer to localhost 5900, meaning that I want to send the commands to connect to my machine to my local host. Now this local host refers to your laptop and to port 5900. And what's going to happen is that the terminal program is going to, since you're using a tunnel, it's going to have to take the information that I sent to my local host to 5900, port 5900, and send it to the server, to my droplet, and the droplet on the other side is going to give it to itself, to its local host, also port 5900, which is the port that is expecting over here, port 5900, my VNC session. So let's connect them and see if we can start our graphical environment. Notice that there's activity on the server side, meaning that we're indeed talking to it. And when we start here, LXDE, which is the graphical environment that we're going to use, does not start by default. You can change your server in order to do that. But I'm giving this graphical window, which is from a very early graphical environment called OpenBox. And what I need to do is I need to start LXDE. So I'm going to type start LXDE and the ampersand sign to send it to the background. I'm going to hit enter. It takes just a little bit, and LXDE starts. Notice that on the bottom I already have my graphical environment. I'm going to say yes here. And the first thing that I like to do is I'm going to minimize this. Do not close this window. If you close this window, you will lose connectivity to your graphical environment, and you'll need to reboot your machine from the terminal window. So I'm just going to minimize this window right here. I like to change the desktop preferences and change the color for my background. I usually like something like this. Say okay. And now I have a nice desktop there. Another thing that I like to do first is to go here and grab the LX terminal here and say right click and say add to desktop. One thing that I like to do usually is to go to here to the panel settings and change a few things. I like to change it so that it looks larger. So I usually change it to 35 pixels, both the icons and the height of the panel there. And I also add some options. I like adding the one that is the keyboard layout handler to know that I'm working with a US layout keyboard. And that's it. So I have my graphical environment ready. I'm going to start a terminal here. And I'm going to also change the settings so that you can see a little bit better. I usually like 16 here. 14 or 15 or 16 is what I usually go for. Say okay. Let's see if that's, yeah, so that's large enough. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grab this window and double click here, and I'm going to run Firefox. And I'm going to connect Firefox to the website to download the HP server. So I'm gonna grab that URL that's on the instructions. Along with Firefox, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna paste it here. So notice that I'm running Firefox and I'm asking Firefox to connect it to that website. So let's see what happens. So Firefox is gonna start. For some reason, the HP Enterprise website always throws this certificate error. There's an old certificate that cannot be verified, but it's safe. So we're gonna say advanced, add exception, confirm security exception, and then we'll go into the HP downloads page, and we're gonna download the latest version posted on the 29th of April 2018. So I'm gonna click here to select it. It takes just a little bit, and then I can say download. It's gonna ask me to accept the terms here. I'll say download, and we're gonna save that file and say okay. And it's gonna take a minute or so to download, so I'm gonna come back when the download is ready. It's done. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna close Firefox. I don't need Firefox anymore. Make sure that I don't close my other window here. I'm gonna close Firefox. Let me clear the background so that's easier for you to see the windows that I'm working with. Okay. So once we've downloaded that one, let's move into our downloads directory. And what we're going to look at is there's the file that we downloaded. So we're going to unzip it. So I'm going to say unzip vsr star, and it will unzip my downloads into different file types used for different virtualizations environments. We're going to use the QCO, which is the one that is going to be used by the Q emulator that we just installed. So once we do that, we actually can go ahead and follow the instructions. We can start installing the virtual router, the virtual switch, the HP virtual switch. So to do that, we're gonna start the GUI utility that allows us to handle virtual machines on our droplet. So let's start with Virt Manager, and there you go. And notice that it ran and there's no errors and saying that it had problems starting. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new virtual machine, and the new virtual machine is going to be using an importing existing this image, which is going to be that .qco file that we have. So let's say forward. We're going to select the path to that virtual machine. I'm going to say browse local, go to my downloads directory, which is right there, and select the QCO. Again, it has to be the file with extension .qco. Let's say open. Then we don't need to provide OS type. Says yes, giving access to this file. We're gonna give it 1 gig of RAM with 1 CPU. It could likely run very efficiently also with half a gig of RAM. So let's say forward. We're gonna call it, since we're creating an HP switch, we're gonna call this HP VSR 1001 VM. We're gonna create a VM there, and we're gonna say finish. And so creating that VM is gonna open a window which show us the output from that VM. So what's gonna happen is that VM is gonna start to boot up, and the first time that it boots up, it's going to install itself inside the QCO file. So the QCO file you cannot run it by itself, but you need to run it and then install or create the image that it can be run afterwards. So that's what we're doing right now. We're expanding the contents of the QCO file that was provided by HP, and in a minute or so, after these two utilities are done, are being loaded into our virtual switch memory, then we should be done. So that's the first utility. There's a second one, it's right there, and when it's done, it starts booting up the switch. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna configure the switch. And notice here it says press Control C or Control D to break. So let's press Control D. and it says press enter to get started. And then we get the prompt from our virtual switch, from our HP Enterprise virtual switch. Here we're going to type the commands that the instructions give you. We're going to go into system view. We're going to select the serial interface, or the virtual serial interface that controls our router user interface, that's called auxiliary 0. And then we're going to say that the authentication mode is none, and also that the user role when we do this is network admin. Okay, we're gonna save this in, say yes, enter, and we're done. We can exit here if we want. So what we've done is we have installed or taken the .qco file and make it an executable that we can run as a virtual machine, and we have run it once, or boot it up once, and change the configuration so that we can log into it without a password and save the configuration. Once we're done with that, we can actually close this window right here. You might need to free the mouse by pressing on Mac, you'll have to press Control Option or Control Option command to free the mouse. Then I can close this window right here. I'm gonna select this one. And there's no way to shut it down, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say File, right click here, shut down. I'm gonna say Force Off and say yes. And we don't need the Virt Manager anymore, because now we have an image, a .qco image that is bootable. So we're gonna close this. I'm gonna go here into the downloads directory where we have our modified QCO image, and we're gonna change the ownership. Notice that right now this one's owned by user root, password root. So let's change it back to us. We're gonna say sudo change the ownership tojallows of the file VSR, anything that has the extension QCO. Include password, and then let's also change the group to the same. Okay, and so if you see now, the ownership of that QCO file is JRLs as we are the main user here. Okay, so let's clear the screen. We're ready to use our virtual switch image inside GNS3. So let's start GNS3. We're gonna start it with a sudo command. The first thing that GNS3 is gonna say, are you sure you wanted a sudo? Yes, that's what we want, so we can do packet captures. So we're gonna cancel this one. We don't care about that one. And we're ready with GNS3. Let's make our window a little bit bigger here. And the first thing we need to do is we need to add the switch to GNS3. To do that, we're gonna go here to edit preferences. And remember that our GNS3, our HP switch comes from a QEmulator image. So we're gonna say we want to add a QEMU VM. We're gonna say new. And the name for this one's gonna be ITS HP VSR 1001, let's say. It's a little bit long, but that's okay. Next, and we're gonna give it the memory that we said that we're gonna give it, to 1024 megabytes or 1 gigabyte. We're gonna connect to it locally via telnet, which is fine. This image, so we're gonna browse, and we're going to go into our downloads directory and select our switch, our QCO image. Right there's our QCO image. We're gonna say open, and we're gonna say yes, copy it to your default directory, that image. So say yes here, and I'll say finish. And we're not done yet. We need to edit some of these properties. The first thing that we're gonna do is, I like changing the symbol so that we can recognize it. So I'm gonna change the symbol, and I'm gonna type here multi and select this nice multi-layer switch, which is appropriate for our multi-layer switch from HP. We're gonna go to where it says networks. I'm gonna say that it's gonna have 6 network adapters. And we're gonna say where it's advanced settings, and we're gonna say that we're gonna be running this with KVM. So we're gonna say -enable -KVM. So there you go. And additional settings, -enable -KVM. Say okay. Notice here indeed we have a summary of our changes. We changed the adapters to 6. We added the option -enable -KVM, and we also change the memory to 1024 and the icon. Okay, so now we can say okay. And here, depending on your installation, sometimes you might need to close GNS3 and restart it, and sometimes not. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a project, an empty project. We're going to call this ITS 6250 project 000. It's just going to be a sample project. Say okay. And we're ready to add things to our project. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go here and click on this icon that allows us to see all the devices. I'm gonna type here where it says filter. I'm gonna type ITS, and notice that right there is the switch that we created. If it doesn't appear, close down GNS3 and restart it, and it should appear. I'm gonna grab this, put one server here. Sorry, one switch here. I'm gonna grab another one and put it over here. And then I'm gonna go to this tool here, which is my link tool. I'm gonna connect interface Ethernet 0 from this with Ethernet 0 from this one. And that's the only thing we're gonna do. We're not gonna configure IP addresses or other links right now. We just want to start the network. So once we're done with that, I want you to notice one thing. Here on the bottom, we have a graph of the activity, of the CPU activity of our virtual machine. Notice that there's very little activity. There's not a lot running right now. I'm going to hit play, and these two switches, each is going to start a copy of the QCO file that we created. So let's do that. I'm going to hit play here. And notice that almost immediately, the CPU usage of our virtual machine goes all the way to 100%. It's going to take like a minute or two to put these two routers, and we'll notice that it's done when the activity goes back down significantly. So let's wait until that happens. So the activity seems to be going down now. Yes, it's already down. And what we're going to do is we're going to expand this a little bit so that you can see it better. And then make this a little bit smaller here. Oops, I'm sorry, I need to move up again. And notice that it says that I can connect to my HP VSR 1001-1 using Telnet to the local host, that is 127.0.0.1. That's the local host address, using port 5000. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to go to my terminal window. I'm going to say I want a new window. I'm going to create a new window there. Let's minimize this. And with this one, I'm going to connect to, I'm going to say Telnet local host 5000 space 5000. Let's see what happens. And notice that indeed now I'm there, and I can look at my router. I can do a system view, and actually can show the interface, all the interface brief maybe. And then there are my interfaces. Notice that it's indeed a switch with, or a router, sorry, with 6 interfaces. I am gonna exit here. It's still there, it's running. Let's open a new tab and let's try to connect to our other switch. So I'm gonna say file, new tab. I'm gonna do a telnet localhost 5002, and indeed it's right there. I can do a system view, and it's the same. It's a different switch with the same, or a copy of the same image. And notice if I do here a show interface brief, indeed I get a router with 6 interfaces. Let's exit. We're not gonna do anything else. I'm gonna close it here. Close it here as well. So here are the 2 ports for each of the routers, 5000 and 5002. And that's it. We cannot shut down the routers from here. So to shut the system down, we can hit stop. But before we do that, let me show you how to connect to our VM from a Windows environment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to close my connection to the graphical environment right here, and then also I'm going to close my tunnel. And now we're going to go into Windows. I am on my Windows box, and what we need to do first is we need to download a VNC viewer to connect to the VM, to the droplet that we're having running right now. That's running right now. And in order to do that, so I'm here on my Windows box, and the first thing that you need to do is download a VNC viewer so that you can connect to the graphical environment from your local machine. I recommend the viewer that comes as a free viewer from Real VNC. So if you type Real VNC /en/connect/download/viewer, you can download the viewer, and if you can search it through your search bar down here, or you can also go, if you want, it's usually installed in program files. So if you go to this PC and then you go to drive C, program files, Real VNC viewer, and there's the VNC viewer that you want to run. So I'm gonna double click here and I'm gonna connect to my machine, but in order to do that I first need to open the tunnel. So I'm gonna type from the command line, I'm gonna type putty JROUS at the IP address and the ports for my tunnel. I'm gonna say enter. I'm gonna type my password, and then I'm gonna hit the arrow up so to restart my graphical environment. Every time that you disconnect from the graphical environment, unless you add a modifier to keep it running, it will stop. So I'm gonna run it again. X11 VNC minus create minus geometry 1024 times 768, enter, and it's listening port 5900. So if I go to my VNC viewer, let's put this here on the background right there. If I go to my VNC viewer and I say I want to connect to my local host port 5900, enter. Notice this activity in the background right there. It says this is an encrypted connection. That's fine. I'll say continue, and there it is. I have my graphical environment right there. I can grow it a little bit, and you can start playing with the settings to make it look nicer with the geometry. One thing that I highly recommend is forcing the VNC viewer here to have a high quality, so picture quality high is the best, so you can actually easily read the numbers there. And that's it. So now we can actually shut it down from here. So let's shut down our HP routers. In order to do that, we just stop all nodes here with the red button, and they're automatically stopped. I'm gonna close GNS3. Say yes. Takes a little to stop it, and I'm gonna close my Real VNC viewer. Notice one thing: if I close my viewer, XVNC on the server automatically stops. So if I want to reconnect to the server, right now I cannot do it. If I go double click here, it says the connection cannot be opened. But if I start again on my server X11 VNC, then I can reconnect again to my server. And there it is. So since, well, we don't want to do that, we don't want to continue working with it right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the VNC viewer here. I'm going to go to my server. I'm going to say sudo shutdown now. Shut down -T6 now. Sorry, sudo shutdown now, not T6 now, sudo shutdown now. And there you go. So it's being started the process of shutting down. I'm gonna close here, and I'm gonna bring back my interface to DigitalOcean. I'm going to go to my machine. I'm gonna create a snapshot. Click here. I'll say a snapshot. I want to create a snapshot for my virtual machine. Say take a snapshot. I'm going to pause it until the snapshot is ready. It took about 3 or 4 minutes. Notice that the size of a snapshot right now is 5 gigabytes. And once I have the snapshot, I'm going to go back to droplets. I'm going to destroy my droplets so that they don't charge me for having a droplet that I'm not using and that it's off. I'm going to destroy it. So I confirm, and indeed now I have no droplets. And remember that you should double check that under your account you actually have configured your billing preferences so that you do not go over your spending limit. For account information, you'll see that on the bottom there says billing alerts, and send you an email anytime that your billing has exceeded a particular amount. Okay, so we're all set with a GNS3 installation from scratch, and we can start using our HP virtual router to create some complex topologies and analyze some packet going through the network.